Welcome to the Humanistic Approach to Teaching, a student-centered focus on how to present instruction in the classroom. Humanism concentrates upon the development of the child's self-concept. If the learner feels good about him or herself, then that is a positive start. Feeling good about oneself would also involve an understanding of one's own strengths and weaknesses, and a belief in one's ability to improve. For the humanist, learning is not an end in itself. It's the means to progress toward the pinnacle of self-development. As the student learns, because he or she is driven inwardly, they derive a reward from the sense of achievement of having learned something all by itself. This differs from a behaviorist point of view, which expects extrinsic rewards to be more effective. Humanism is about rewarding yourself. Humanism expects the teacher to pay attention to the role of non-cognitive variables in learning, things like your learner's needs, emotions, values, and self-perceptions. Humanism strives to help your learners better understand themselves, and as a teacher, you can do that by creating a positive classroom environment that activates the desire to learn. Students are motivated to learn when the material that's presented in the classroom is found to be personally meaningful to them. To be successful, students must understand the reasons for the learning, for the material that's being presented, and adjust their behavior accordingly. And finally, students must believe the classroom environment supports their effort to learn. Add these three characteristics to your classroom teaching, and the humanistic student will be successful. Let's delve a little deeper into humanism by looking at the three advocates that are identified as humanistic psychologists. We'll look at Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, and Arthur Combs. Most educators are already familiar with Abraham Maslow, so we won't spend a whole lot of time on his hierarchy of human needs. Here's a quick image just to refresh your memory. We start with the basic needs of physiological, up to safety, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. For the humanist, Maslow's hierarchy of human needs is important because it talks about how to help students develop their full potential, self-actualization, by satisfying the needs at these various levels. Carl Rogers was both a humanist and a psychotherapist. He believed if an individual attained self-actualization, they would be a fully functioning, living person, enjoying the good life. By this, he means that the individual would have a positive, healthy, psychological outlook, trust their own feelings, and have congruence in their life between the self and the experiences. For the humanistic teacher, learning-centered education comes from Carl Rogers, and it establishes a condition that allows for self-directed learning. Many humanists believe that for learning to actually occur, there must be a change in the learner. I can teach all I want to teach, but if the learner didn't learn it, then your instruction was unsuccessful. Arthur Combs championed humanistic counseling and education. He proposed a theory that incorporated humanistic values and cognitive factors. He decried treating people as things. He insisted on the right and responsibility of persons to choose their own best ways, using their own best judgment, and that includes learning. He was a beacon for humanistic education, educational leadership, and personal counseling. This slide shows the 6 characteristics of good teachers in the classroom as viewed by the humanists. Successful classroom teachers are well informed about their subject. This is the first and foremost characteristic of a good teacher. But in addition, they're also sensitive to the feelings of students in the classroom and their colleagues at the workplace. They believe that all students can learn, and more importantly, that learning is intrinsically motivated. Good teachers have a positive self-concept, and they believe in helping all of their students do their very best work. And as a result, since students are so individual, that there are many different methods of instruction, and a good teacher is able to use and implement many of those. We're going to spend a little time looking at teaching from a humanistic perspective. Keep in mind that the humanistic teacher believes that student learning should be self-directed. Students should produce their own work, and they should be expected to know and want to learn. For the humanistic classroom, the only meaningful evaluation is self-evaluation, and that takes a little bit of extra work on the part of the instructor. Feelings as well as knowledge are important in the learning process. And finally, students learn best from a non-threatening environment. So let's look at how some of these best practices can be used in the classroom. For the humanist, the teacher's primary goal is to understand their students' needs, values, motives, and self-perceptions. Most importantly, the teacher's goal is to help the student learn and learn how to learn. The humanistic atmosphere is established in the classroom by a teacher who expresses general interest in each student. Think of it, if you will, as putting a Maslow's hierarchy of need pyramid next to the picture, the photo of each student on your course roster, and gauging during each class session at what level of that hierarchy each student is operating. That will help you determine how to teach your material. Students are more likely to openly discuss their opinions, feelings, and problems associated with learning and instruction in a humanistic setting. Another purpose of the humanistic teacher is to guide your students towards the correct actions, not telling them what to do, but letting them learn the process of what works and what is not successful. Let's take a few minutes to pause and reflect on the concepts of humanism that we've been talking about. Again, just as kind of a recap, students should be able to choose what they want to learn. Humanistic teachers believe that students will be motivated to learn a subject if it's something that they need and want to know. The goal of education should be to foster a student's desire to learn, and then to teach them how to learn. Students should be self-motivated in their studies and should have a desire to learn on their own. Humanistic teachers believe that grades are irrelevant and the only self-evaluation is meaningful. Grading encourages students to work for a grade and not for personal satisfaction. Humanistic educators are opposed to objective tests, multiple choice, true, false, because they test the student's ability to memorize and do not provide sufficient educational feedback to either the teacher or the student themselves. Humanistic educators believe that both feelings and knowledge are important to the learning process. And unlike some of our traditional educators, our behaviorists, or even our cognitivists, humanistic teachers do not separate the cognitive and affective domains. They insist that schools need to provide students with a non-threatening environment so that they will feel secure to learn. When students feel that security, learning becomes easier and more meaningful. Think about your own classroom experience. Can you recall any teacher who used the humanistic technique? Were those your favorite teachers? Did you learn from them? Did they provide you something that you could actually model your own effectiveness as a classroom teacher? There's always plenty more to learn about this particular important school of educational psychology. So as we finish up our review here, let me encourage you to go out and do some research on your own to learn more about the best practices of humanistic education in the classroom.